So, good morning everyone. As I believe you've just been told, I'll be speaking in English, so I trust that's okay for everyone. As I'm from Australia, you probably all speak English more correctly than me anyway. Right, so good morning. I'm here to talk about the global iPlayer. So my name's Ricardo Donato. I'm the head of commercial and strategy for BBC Global iPlayer. I'm going to talk you through where we've got to on the global iPlayer and give you a quick overview of the product itself. Then I'll cover off some of the guiding principles that got us this far. And then I'll share, hopefully, some interesting insight from what we've learnt to date. Before I do that, let me just give you a very quick overview about BBC Worldwide, who we are and what we do. We are, quite simply, and it is quite a simple concept, though in the UK it's often confused, we are the commercial arm of the BBC. So we exist to generate revenue off the back of the BBC's brands and activity and plough that money back into the BBC. Okay, now that doesn't really even tell the true story. What that is about is exploiting and developing commercial revenues off the back of 75 plus years of building some of the greatest, we would argue, TV brands and formats and developing new and innovative programs and making commercially valid decisions around each of those. So at the moment, our business is a very much traditional media business. We have pay TV. We have a sales and distribution arm, we have a successful DVD business, and increasingly a DTO business. Last financial year, we generated revenues of 1.1 billion. We had profits of 160 million, of which 182, because we also invest in formats, went back to the BBC, which helps to underwrite the license fee. Perfect. Right. That's enough about Worldwide, so let's talk about Global iPlayer, and first just a little bit about me. So, Head of Commercial and Strategy for BBC Global iPlayer. My job is to oversee our commercial and strategic thinking and development as we transition ourselves through a pilot phase. We launched in July last year. We're live in 16 European territories, including Germany. We've launched in Canada and in Australia. We launched originally just on the iPad, but on the back of the success of that, we've also extended it to other iOS devices, so the iPod Touch and on iPhone. Now, I'm aware some of you may not be too familiar with the iPlayer, though perhaps you are. So let me just rewind and talk a little bit about what was the inspiration for the global iPlayer, which unsurprisingly was the UK iPlayer. The UK iPlayer is a fantastic VOD leading service. It delivers in the region of about 150 million requests a month for television and radio content. We believe it is one of the world's leading VOD services, and that clearly was the inspiration for what we're trying to do with the global iPlayer. However, we had to do something slightly different because the BBC iPlayer is a catch-up 7-day window service. It's being fed off the UK's channels and is primarily there to support the linear transition. Obviously, if you're taking the concept globally, we can't feed off those channels because they don't exist. Equally, as the commercial arm, we weren't going to give it away for free. So, during the pilot period, we've developed the app. It is given away free, the actual app. Started off with about 10 hours of free content, but that's now moved to 30 hours of free content. However, if you want the full, rich, deep archive that's available on the service, originally 2,000 hours, now it's up to about 3,000 hours because we're adding to it every month. There's a subscription charge. Across Europe, €6.99 or $64.99, that's the monthly charge, or $64.99 for the year. As I said, that gets you full access to 2,000 plus hours, which is growing. It's now just a hit over 3,000 hours. Again, as I said, we're fundamentally different from the UK version because we have to be. And so we've positioned ourselves rather than as a catch-up service, because that philosophically obviously doesn't exist because we don't have those channels internationally. We're trying to understand what can we offer our customers and our viewers in terms of an editorialized selection of new and archived content, primarily showcasing BBC content, but also taking its theme as the best of British content. So we will take content from other producers. So in addition to BBC programs like Top Gear and Doctor Who, we've also got shows from British production companies such as Sherlock from Hartswood, Steve Coogan, The Inside Story from Baby Cow, Wallander from Left Bank. We've also done deals with DRG, Digital Rights Group, Hattrick, SoTV, so big production companies. At its heart, the BBC iPlayer aims to bring the best of British. That is our stall, that is our promise. Securing deals with our third-party partners ensures that we're not just limiting ourselves to the BBC content, but we're also representing what we think is a meaningful collection to our customers. What's the key point here is what every single show that goes into the service has been editorialized and curated by the team back in London. We have people sitting down working out what are the programs we want to bring to the iPlayer. It's not simply stack them high. So if you like, the analogy that we try to use back in London is to think a bit about a supermarket versus a boutique store. We could, and you see existing VOD services where a supermarket, massive choice of products, pile them high, you go in there, invariably there is something there you want, you may not know where to find it, you may not know where exactly it's going to be, but you're confident that there is a lot of stuff there. We think of ourselves as more of a boutique store. We will think about what's going to be in that store. We will make recommendations about things that you might like. And we will believe that there is a real power in serendipity. It's not just about stumbling upon things. We're placing things there because we think, based on the promise of what we've delivered, that there is something there for everyone. So to give you an example, we have a TV mockumentary fronted by Sir Michael Parkinson called Ghost Wasp. It is banned in 1992 on TV, but is now, via the global iPlayer, we've allowed people to discover it, we've worked out what people like to watch, and we've seen the viewing of that program, still banned on TV, interestingly, absolutely shoot up. So we select products that we think customers will like. We make it easy for them to discover, and we help them to find things that they didn't know they even wanted. So you may come in for the latest episode of something like Lark Rise to Candleford, but you end up finding lesser-known services like Blackadder Christmas Special, Porridge, Steptoe and Son, or Likely Ads. That, for us, is what editorial curation is about. It's about selecting the right content in each market, and I'll come on a little bit more about that in a minute, and making sure that people are aware of what they can find. It also means that because people are coming into the store and they're understanding what sort of things we represent, that allows us to actually put things there that they would expect to see. So I'm pleased to announce today that we'll be launching London Calling, which is also going out across all the other BBC Worldwide channels. It's an ambitious global event which will bring the best of what we're calling the World City 2012 London to the world. So we have the Golden Jubilee and we have the Olympics, and we'll be representing on the global iPlayer programming and events that represent London but also cover its music, its fashion, its art, its culture and its history, all about London, and we'll be launching that from June. And that will mirror what's going on across our paid channel networks, across BBC Worldwide's channels, but also, as I said, represents what people would expect to find in our curated store. Coming back to another example of this concept of curation, so Doctor Who, a very big franchise for us. So rather than just sticking up a whole load of modern Doctor Who, we've created a journey. So people can go through either Doctor Who, William Hartnell years, so very early on. It's not the stuff that you would necessarily see on the linear channels because this stuff is now 30 years old. Or we might take a hook via the Daleks Forever. So you can go view and you can link your way through all the episodes of Doctor Who that relate to Daleks. Again, giving you the opportunity and experience to have a deeper engagement with the content. So, how is this working for us? Well, hopefully, and we think it is working. So, encouragingly, and we're pleased to say that a third of all viewers of one program go on to watch another. So, they like what they're seeing. They are typically watching more than 30 minutes of content in one go. And overall, people are watching 1.1 shows per viewing. More excitingly, for us, we believe the homepage screen, which is where a lot of our editorial thinking and effort goes into, is encouraging 25% of people go back and browse that part of the app after watching something. So they're there, they know that this is something where they don't just go and grab off the shelf and walk out. They actually go there, they watch something, and they say, okay, well, that was worth my time. What else is there to see? All of this to us clearly suggests that this concept of editorial journey is having some resonance, is having some effect. Social media. Excuse me. So another important part of what we've been trying to learn and what we've developed as we launched this back in July was around social media. Clearly, everyone talks about social media. Clearly, it's a digital product. So clearly, these people are very savvy in terms of use of Facebook and YouTube, etc. What we've been trying to do and what we've baked in from the very start is to make this a two-way process. You know, we launched the store, but we wanted to know what people think. So to date, we have got around 20,000 followers across Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Not huge numbers, admittedly, but we've recently announced plans to introduce radio content. That was a direct response to what people were telling us via social media. They wanted more of this sort of content, so we were able to accommodate that and bring it to the store. They've also helped us to define what shows we put on the app on a territory-by-territory basis. So, for example, social media, we were able to see that Canadian users were talking a lot about Waking the Dead. So, throughout February, we went through and we gave them new episodes of Waking the Dead every week in February. When we announced that we're going to launch an arts and culture section on the app, we asked people what did they want to see, and they very clearly said they wanted to see the Culture Show and Wonderland. So we secured those rights and we put them up on the service. Now, to be clear, it's incredibly fashionable to talk about social media and the second screen, and we are not. This is still a viewing experience. We are not changing the content. What we have done is baked in social media from the start as this two-way dialogue. Again, coming back to the analogy of the store, we want to have an open dialogue with our users. We're not changing the way they watch TV or content in the way that perhaps some second screens are trying to do. We're not planning to do that with our social media, but we want people to think about and come in and say, well, actually, we would like this, and we'd be able to offer them and get them to vote on and to suggest what sort of content we bring to the store. So, big question, why have we done it? Okay, so often asked this question, and the obvious immediate answer is of the back of what we know. As BBC, part of the BBC, we know that VOD services are incredibly popular, consumer choice. As I said, 150 million VOD deliveries for a month from BBC public service iPlayer. So there's no denying that VOD is popular. And so based on our experience, it seemed logical for us to try and launch a VOD service and take it globally. But there's many other reasons. This one is one that we like to bandy around the office, is the Kodak moment. So you'll all be aware that Kodak developed cameras a long time ago, but their primary revenue was actually from film and from the chemicals for developing film. And as they grew as a business, they developed the first digital camera. Now, apparently, it was the size of a toaster, took 23 seconds to take a picture, and only had 1/10 of a megapixel. Slightly interesting, but there you go. When they looked at the concept and decided what should they do with it, they actually parked it. They actually said, we don't want to do this because it would cannibalize our existing business. We make films, why would we want a digital camera? The problem with the thinking was, whilst they didn't cannibalize their business, the market did, and as a result, in January, Kodak actually went bankrupt. Another key reason why we're doing this, consumer insight. BBC Worldwide, traditionally, as business, has been about selling programs. We sell programs to platforms internationally, or we sell programs to channels. We actually don't have much of a direct B2C business or brand internationally, and we actually don't have that much insight into what people, how they consume our brands, other than once it's sold and we try to track viewing figures or we try to see what the market is demanding. So the BBC Global iPlayer is a direct response and a direct attempt to start to build that brand and to start to engage with our customers, our viewers, internationally and understand what they want. We have very real ambitions of being able to, as you've seen already from the social media, in terms of being able to drive and understand so that BBC Worldwide can consider what other programs, what other formats work internationally and how it should approach the international market. Another reason we've launched this is to open up our archive. As I said, BBCs have been in TV for 75 years. There's a lot of TVs, there's a lot of content. The classical restrictions of a linear schedule mean that a lot of our content, so if you go back to the Doctor Who example, where a lot of those earlier episodes simply aren't available. You can't watch them. But if you're a Doctor Who fan, they're incredibly interesting, incredibly valuable to you. We're not constrained as a linear schedule is constrained. We're not constrained by the timing of the linear schedule or the market in terms of where people want to, what programs third parties want to buy. So we have the opportunity to exploit and generate commercial revenue from our great archive. So for us, we believe, and I'll talk about this in a moment, is the potential for the long tail is significant in our content. And we know that our users want to access a whole range of content that we hold in the vaults. And the global iPlayer is seen going forward as a fundamental way to access and exploit and to generate interest in long-forgotten content. Another reason that we think global iPlayer is important is that it's, more broadly, it's proving the potential of the VOD as a medium. We launched this as a pilot, and the reason we launched it as a pilot was to understand. We absolutely believe in VOD, and we've got the background from the public service, and we think about what that's proved and what has that shown. But we need to understand what it is to run a VOD service internationally. So we launched it as a pilot in July. We restricted ourselves to iOS. But what we're trying to do and what we're working through are all the questions and all the challenges and all the aspects of what it is to build a non-linear service. What is it that gets us to a tipping point, and what's the right mix of content, of windowing, of marketing, of presentation, of platform, all those questions that we hadn't even thought of when we launched it. What's the right mix to give us the optimum commercial value from a non-linear VOD service? So, how is it going? So, growth to date. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Australia, with its cultural ties, me for example, and its affinity to the UK, is our biggest partners, our biggest territory, 20% of the global business. But interestingly, Germany and Netherlands are in second and third place. Viewing habits. We have four shows per week, beg your pardon. And interestingly, 30% of viewers are choosing to download, view offline. So it suggests that they want to, well, it may be to do with broadband speeds, but it may also suggest that people are taking their content and viewing it elsewhere. Now that's an important stat for us because it's suggesting that this is incremental and adding value to the viewing experience. Also interestingly, 17% of subscribers access the app on multiple devices. So again, we're on iPad, iPhone, and iPod. So 17% are using a range of those three devices. Whereas, perhaps just as interesting, 8% don't appear to have an iPad at all. So they're watching it on either their iPhone or their iPod Touch, or they're using AirPlay and HDMI. Now, this is actually broadly in line with what we see in the UK as well. So that's sort of suggesting, again, some sort of knowledge of the international VOD market that we're building up by this pilot. Now, I don't think this is coming up. No, okay, so just before we get onto this slide, sorry. So also on the HDMI and AirPlay, 25% of people are choosing to watch on the big screen. And again, that's interesting for us. It's not just about the device, it's not just limited to the iPad, but they're actually using perhaps their iPod and iPhone to watch it on a big TV screen. So somehow to us it suggests some sort of complementary additional viewing that they all associate with the single screen, the big screen. So, in terms of when people watch, anyone who's worked in broadcast will find this utterly uninteresting. It's kind of the same. So prime time, 9 p.m., that's what we see on TV. Kids is weekday peak is 7 a.m. actually, which again, if you're a parent, that won't surprise you. So something like Charlie and Lola is watched at 7 a.m. What's perhaps slightly more interesting about that, which I only thought about on the way here, was perhaps the chief breadwinner is the one who has the iPad. Perhaps that's when the kids are getting up and that's been handed while you're getting ready to go to work, because you would normally also expect to see some kids around 3 or 4, which we don't necessarily see, which is interesting. And daytime, we're also seeing a viewing spike in weekend on a Saturday up to about 5 o'clock. And again, very traditional linear viewing. That's no surprises there, we think. In terms of content, so what's good to see is that users are accessing a broad range of programs. Unsurprisingly, Top Gear and Doctor Who are pretty popular. However, we're also seeing people leaning towards some unexpected content. So we've got The Secrets of Scientology, a one-off documentary about Scientology, has consistently performed incredibly well in every territory. We don't really know why, but it just keeps resonating. Across countries, we've also seen some clear genre trends emerge. News specials and documentaries do well in Ireland, but not that popular in Australia. Australians are more enthusiastic about the selection of comedy on offer. Italians quite like drama. All countries show an interest in Doctor Who, but none more so than the Nordics, Sweden, Denmark and Finland. Here in Germany, particularly fond of cookery shows, Naked Chef and Raymond Blanc's Kitchen Secrets, and Canadians, for whatever reason, are well into their crime and thriller genres, so Waking the Dead, Sherlock, Whitechapel. Now, what this does sort of tell us and why we spend a lot of time thinking about this is, again, you come back, this is part all about learning. What is it about VOD that we want to understand? So one is about what does geography mean, and how do we get that customer insight, and what do we do about it? Now, a big question that's emerging for us is one about localization. How much do we spend making our content different and curated differently for each region? And currently we do. In Australia, in Canada, and across Europe, these are curated differently. How far we go down that spectrum remains to be seen. And, you know, this is bringing up new challenges in terms of curation, in terms of scheduling, and the way we think about things. But again, exactly why we launched the VOD service. Again, if you come back to the viewing stuff, though, some very traditional learning as well. We know when they're going to watch it. It's just like a traditional scheduling concept. But again, internationally, what does it mean? So challenges. So far, I've painted fairly rosy. It hasn't always felt rosy from the other side, but a picture of what we've learned and what it's all been about. One of our key challenges is consistently we're challenged on, are we cannibalizing our own business? And obviously, to be clear, BBC Worldwide, we're not interested in cannibalizing our own business. We have a very good business with channels and a very good business with selling content. So one of the questions that we're always asked internally, are we cannibalizing our own business? Jana Bennett, who is responsible for Global iPlayer and was also interestingly responsible when she was in charge of BBC Vision, oversaw the launch of iPlayer. Certainly public services experiences as VOD viewing went up on iPlayer, so did it across the channels. We believe fundamentally that this is incremental and adding to the viewing experience. It's enhancing the BBC brand, and it's also allowing people to discover content or related content that they can then watch similar content on our channel's business. But that's part of the work that we need to continue to explore and develop and to prove internally. So from a user's point of view, we don't see it as an either-or decision. People are always going to watch and sit down on the sofa and watch their telly. HDMI, AirPlay seems to talk to that. And they're going to be guided via linear schedule, or they're going to want to have their hand held in terms of what they're going to watch. That very much is the philosophy we're taking with Global iPlayer. Interestingly, one difference for us in terms of a linear schedule versus the iPlayer is the 80-20 rule. In a typical linear schedule, you would expect 80% of your impacts or your viewers to come from 20% of your content. For us, it's more like 60%. So 40% of the long tail, 40% of our impacts is coming from this massive long tail. So again, to us, suggests some sort of incrementalness, something in the value of the archive that suggests that what we're doing is on the right track. So, briefly, in conclusion. So, what do we want to say about where we've got to? Again, we're a pilot, started in July, we're still learning as we go along. But we think what we have learned and what we do believe is that this is an additive service. We also believe that there are new habits that are emerging, but there's some very similar ones. So that schedule point talks to that. This is not so new in terms of let's rip up the rule books, because TV is still TV, and we absolutely believe that linear scheduling, all those curation, traditional broadcasting values are the skills that we want to bring to Global iPlayer. We have an outstanding question on localization. What does that mean for us? Now, on the plus side, we're getting a lot more insight. The challenge with that is which are the relevant pieces and how do we actually make sense of those? And also, how do we create a team internally that is structured around the ability to deliver a curated store, given their background in a linear scheduling environment, and what are the tools and what are the languages and what are the insights that we need to deploy that they keep their insight from where they've come from, but also understand enough about new technologies and new patterns. And so we're constantly emerging the way we work together, the way the team's structured, to try and understand that. And finally, we absolutely believe that this concept of serendipity is will be fundamental to the success of Global iPlayer. It's about you coming to our service and finding something that you weren't expecting to find, but that somehow brings value to your viewing experience. Thank you very much.